Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. This time, we're strapping in not as passengers, but as investigators of those systems that keep us comfy and breathing easy way up at 35,000 feet.
Yeah, aircraft air conditioning and pressurization.
We're going way beyond just, avoiding a sweaty flight. This is about how the whole plane functions up there.
Right, the whole enchilada.
We'll be digging into an aircraft systems study guide and getting our hands dirty with some technical manuals to really see how it all works.
Sounds intense.
Mhm.
So let's imagine ourselves pre-flight walking down that jet bridge, and above us, all these systems are already humming away. What's the main gig of an aircraft air conditioning system? What's it got to do?
Well, it's more than just keeping the cabin at a nice temperature.
Right, more than just avoiding that airplane sauna feeling.
Exactly. Our study guide lays it out. The system also handles pressurization, making sure all those vital avionics, the electronics, are properly ventilated. And sometimes it even controls the ventilation and heating for the cargo hold.
So it's about the whole plane being happy and functional. Exactly. And here's something that might surprise you. Um, Planes have separate ventilation just for their avionics. All those sensitive electronics need their own climate control.
Wow, it makes you realize how much engineering goes into even the seemingly simple stuff about flying. It's like creating this whole mini environment up there.
Yeah, you could say that. And right at the heart of this environment is the air cycle machine, ACM for short. Think of it like a refrigerator, but in the sky.
A sky fridge.
Exactly. And it uses compressed air from the engines to, well, cool the cabin.
Now, why use the engine's air for that? Why not just a separate electrical system like our fridges at home?
Well, using what's already there, that hot compressed air from the engines, we call it bleed air, is incredibly efficient. The ACM takes this bleed air and, well, it goes through a process that cools and expands it to hit that perfect temperature.
Okay, unpack that a bit. How does hot engine air become that blast of cool air we feel when we open those overhead vents?
It all starts with pre-cooling, using something called ram air, which is basically the outside air the plane is flying through.
Ah, so using the speed of the plane to pre-chill the air.
You got it. This cools down that bleed air a bit before it even gets to the heart of the ACM, which is the expansion turbine.
Okay, so it's pre-chilled, then what?
Well, as the air expands through this turbine, its temperature drops, like way down. It's basic physics. Expanding gas equals cooler temps.
Okay, yeah, vaguely remember that from high school physics. So the turbine itself is using that expanding air energy to make the cooling happen.
Exactly. And the cool part, no pun intended, is that the expansion turbine also helps power the ACM itself. It's a pretty self-sustaining system.
Amazing. We've got this chilled air, but we're not all huddled around one giant vent on the plane. How does the system regulate the temperature throughout the whole cabin?
Think of it like different climate zones in a house. We've got the zone controller. It's like the brain, figuring out the right temperature for each zone based on how many passengers are on board and the temperature outside.
So that's why sometimes you see those little displays above the seats with slightly different temperature readings?
Right. And it's not random. The zone controller sends signals to the pack controllers. Each air conditioning pack has one, and to those trim air valves, which do the fine-tuning, mixing hot and cold air for specific areas. So if your feet are freezing by the window, your zone might just need a little more hot air mixed in.
Interesting. So it's not always the whole system acting up. Maybe just a specific zone needs tweaking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of adjustments, we got to talk about that thing that lets us actually breathe up there at altitude.
Yeah.
Pressurization. Imagine climbing a mountain and that thinning air as you go higher. Now imagine 30,000 feet without pressurization.
Okay, getting a bit lightheaded just thinking about it.
Yeah.
So how does a plane create breathable air way up there?
It basically recreates a lower altitude inside the cabin. Pretty neat, huh?
Oh, very neat.
The system manages the airflow, in and out of the pressurized areas to keep that cabin altitude safe and comfy for all of us. It's all managed by an outflow valve, which controls how much air escapes, and even more importantly, the cabin pressure controllers, CPCs.
CPCs, those sound like VIPs in the pressurization world.
They are. They're constantly getting info from other systems, altitude sensors and such, to make sure the pressure inside stays at a safe level for all of us. And here's the kicker. There are actually two CPCs, and the system switches between them every single flight.
Wait, two? Is that like a backup system just in case one goes kaput?
It's more than just backup. It's about that nonstop safety. Since one CPC could, theoretically fail mid-flight, the system alternates between them. Uninterrupted operation is the name of the game.
So it's like having a co-pilot for the pressure system, ensuring a smooth ride the entire flight. Makes you feel a lot more secure knowing there's that level of redundancy, right?
Definitely. And while we're on the topic of safety, we can't forget those safety valves. They're like the ultimate backup, preventing pressure extremes and protecting the plane from damage.
So we're talking more than just a pressure release valve, like on a pressure cooker, right?
Way more sophisticated.
Yeah.
These valves are there to prevent damage to the whole fuselage. If the pressure inside goes too high, or on the flip side, if there's a sudden drop.
So they're protecting the plane from being crushed by external pressure or conversely from like decompressing like a runaway balloon.
Exactly. They're silently working, making sure the plane's structure can handle all those pressure changes.
Feels like they've thought of everything to keep us safe up there. Okay, so we've got this amazing ACM, temperature regulation, pressurization, and these incredible safety backups. But what happens if something does go wrong? Does any little hiccup mean the flight's grounded?
Not always. And that's where the minimum equipment list we call the MEL comes in.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit.
The MEL, it's like a customized checklist for each airline and aircraft type. It tells you which equipment can actually be inoperative, under certain conditions, keeps things flexible while still hitting those super high safety standards.
So it's a way to keep those planes flying safely even if everything isn't, perfectly in tip-top shape.
Exactly. And it's not just some generic list either. It's tailored to each airline's operations and what their maintenance folks can handle.
So say a pilot finds a problem with some component before a flight. How does this MEL actually get used?
They would, check the MEL to see if that part is listed and what the procedures are for flying with it not working. Might need specific maintenance actions, or maybe there's some operational restrictions.
So the MEL is kind of like their guide for making those safe decisions.
Yeah, you could say that. Like, let's take that pack flow control valve we were talking about earlier. It goes kaput. The MEL might say, hey, you can only fly at this altitude, or here's how to deactivate that faulty valve.
It's amazing that there are procedures for like dealing with these in-flight situations. It's not just, oh, something's broken, land immediately.
Right. It's all about that balance, safety, and keeping things running smoothly.
Okay, so going back to pressurization for a sec, we've talked about the idea, but what are the actual parts involved? You mentioned an outflow valve and the CPCs, but like, what do they look like? Where are they on the plane?
Okay, so the outflow valve, it's this big movable door. It's usually near the tail and the fuselage. It's literally controlling how much air is leaving the plane.
So it's constantly adjusting based on what those cabin pressure controllers tell it to do?
Exactly. The CPCs are like the brains of the operation. They take in information from tons of sensors, altitude, airspeed, the whole 9 yards, and then they tell the outflow valve how to adjust the cabin pressure.
It really makes you appreciate those like hidden complexities of flying. You're up there sipping your drink, totally oblivious to all this precision happening around you.
Right. And those safety valves we were talking about, they're a key part of the pressurization system, too. They're there to prevent, extreme pressure that could damage the fuselage.
So they're like the last line of defense if the main system has a hiccup. What would make them actually activate?
If the cabin pressure gets too high or too low, outside those predetermined limits, the safety valves kick in. They release pressure or stop it from building up too much, all to protect the plane from structural damage.
It's like a fail-safe inside a fail-safe.
Yeah.
Really shows how seriously they take safety in aviation.
No doubt about it. And all of this, the ACM, the pressurization, the temperature regulation, it's all happening for both us passengers and, importantly, for the plane's nervous system, its avionics.
Right. We touched on that separate ventilation for the electronics earlier. Why can't they just be kept cool by the main air conditioning?
Well, think about how much heat your computer or phone generates. Now, multiply that by all the complex systems on a plane. That heat needs to be managed, and precisely so, or things could malfunction or get damaged.
So it's not just about like a comfy temperature for the pilots up in the cockpit?
Nope, not at all. That avionics ventilation system is crucial for the whole aircraft to operate safely and reliably.
So how does it work? Is it like a mini version of the cabin air conditioning?
It can be, but it's often more targeted. Might have dedicated cooling fans, circulating air around those vital components, and heat sink spectral materials that absorb and get rid of the heat.
So less about just blowing cold air everywhere and more about like strategically managing the heat where it really counts.
Exactly. And what's key is that this system is usually totally separate from the main cabin air conditioning, as that extra layer of redundancy just in case one fails.
It's almost like having two life support systems, one for us and one for the planes, like Brame.
Good way to put it. It really shows you how important it is to keep those electronics running smoothly no matter what happens.
It's mind-blowing when you think about all these systems working together. We step on a plane, and it's just a comfortable cabin. But underneath it all is this incredibly intricate network of engineering.
Yeah, that's the cool part about these deep dives. We get to peel back those layers and really get it.
I'm starting to see the plane less as just transportation and more like a marvel of engineering.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
And there's another piece of this puzzle that really showcases that. The minimum equipment list, the MEL. Remember how we talked about how it keeps planes flying safely, even when some things aren't working?
Yeah, you mentioned it's tailored to each airline. Is it really that
Oh,
customized?
yeah, absolutely. The airline develops their own MEL, working with the aircraft manufacturer and the regulators, making sure it meets their specific needs and those all-important safety standards.
So it's not like there's one big MEL handbook that every airline just follows.
Nope, much more nuanced than that. The MEL considers things like the airline's routes, the type of aircraft, what their maintenance can handle, and even how experienced their crew is.
Okay, makes sense. So how detailed does it actually get? What kind of stuff is in an MEL?
It can get super specific.
Yeah.
For every piece of equipment it's allowed to be inoperative, the MEL will say like what the limitations are, any special procedures, and even alternative ways to do that equipment's job.
So for that pack flow control valve, the MEL wouldn't just say, hey, you can fly with one broken. It would give specific instructions. So,
Exactly. It would say stuff like the highest altitude you can fly at, how to deactivate that valve, and any extra checks they got to do before takeoff.
wow, it's like this super detailed instruction manual for when things go wrong.
Yeah, you could say that. And the beauty of it is that it makes sure everyone's on the same page when it comes to safety. Every pilot and every mechanic knows exactly what to do if something isn't working,
It really highlights how like meticulous and planned out air travel is.
for sure. And it's not just about safety. The MEL also helps prevent those annoying delays and cancellations.
Really? How
Yeah.
so?
Well, imagine some minor thing breaks right before a flight. Without the MLO, they might have to ground the plane, wait for a part, and, mess up hundreds of passengers' trips.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the ML lets them assess the situation, make a good decision, and maybe keep things on schedule as long as it's safe, of course.
Exactly. It gives them that wiggle room to be both safe and efficient, even when things don't go exactly as planned.
Okay, so we've got this crazy comprehensive document telling everyone what to do if something's broken. But how does a pilot actually use this ML in a real situation? It's got to be a pretty thick book, right?
Oh yeah, the ML can be pretty hefty, but it's designed to be easy to use and easy to find what you need.
So they're not like flipping through hundreds of pages mid-flight.
Definitely not. Pilots know the MEL really well. They know where to find what they need.
But let's say something unexpected happens. Is there like a flow chart they follow?
There's a process. First, they figure out what's actually not working and make sure it really is broken.
So no false alarms, no easy fixes.
Right. Then they check the MEL to see if that part is even listed. If it is, they carefully review all the procedures and limitations for that specific thing.
And then they decide if it's safe to fly.
Exactly. The decision is based on a bunch of things. What's broken, the MEL procedures, the weather, and, the whole situation.
So it's not just a yes or no answer.
Nope, definitely not. Needs careful thought and good judgment.
It's fascinating how much goes into those decisions. And I'm guessing the MEL isn't like set in stone. It probably gets updated and changed, right?
You got it. It's a living document,
Mhm.
always changing based on new information, new tech, and what they learn from experience.
So they don't just print it out and it's good for the life of the plane.
No way. It gets revised and updated all the time to make sure it's still relevant and doing its job.
What kind of things would cause an update to the MEL?
Lots of things. Could be something simple, like a change in how they do maintenance, or something big, like a new safety rule from the FAA.
So always adapting to be safer and more efficient.
Exactly. It shows you how committed the aviation industry is to always improving.
I'm really getting a sense of how the MEL fits into the whole picture of aircraft safety. It's like this behind-the-scenes network of rules that keeps everything running smoothly.
Yeah, it is. And it shows how airlines, manufacturers, and the regulators all work together to make flying as safe as possible.
Okay, so we've looked at the MEL, explored these intricate systems of air conditioning and pressurization, and I feel like we've gained a whole new appreciation for all the things happening behind the scenes to make flying possible.
Definitely. And it all starts with the incredible engineering that goes into designing and building these systems in the first place.
Are there any like particularly clever or surprising things about these systems that stand out to you as an expert?
Well, the air cycle machine is a pretty amazing piece of engineering. I mean,
Yeah.
using the engine's own hot bleed air to actually make things cool is really clever.
Yeah, like they took a potential problem and turned it into a solution.
Exactly. And then there's the whole concept of pressurization, right? Making breathable air at 35,000 feet is no easy task.
It's like creating a little mini Earth inside the plane.
That's a great way to put it. And don't forget those safety valves. They're like the silent guardians, always ready to protect the plane if the pressure goes haywire.
It's good to know they're there, working hard behind the scenes.
Absolutely. And then, of course, we have the MEL.
Right, that crucial document that makes sure we're safe even when things don't go as planned.
Exactly. It really shows the attention to detail and careful planning that goes into the whole aviation industry.
I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We went from the basics of air conditioning and pressurization to those complex components and the fail-safes that keep everything running smoothly.
And we even dove deep into that super important MEL and how it helps keep flights safe and on time.
It's been a fascinating journey. I feel like I'm stepping off this plane with a whole new appreciation for how complex and ingenious air travel is.
And hopefully, you'll never look at those overhead air vents the same way again.
Definitely not. Next time I fly, I'll be thinking about all those intricate systems working hard to keep me comfy and safe.
And maybe you'll even give a little nod of thanks to the engineers who made it all possible.
Absolutely, they really are the unsung heroes of aviation. It's amazing when you really think about it. So much human ingenuity goes into making something as complex as air travel work so, seamlessly. And it's not just about flying, it's about creating this whole safe and controlled environment miles above the earth.
And what's really cool is that, this environment is constantly being checked and tweaked in real time. While you're up there enjoying your pretzels and tomato juice, sensors are gathering info, systems are talking to each other, and little adjustments are being made to keep that perfect balance of temperature, pressure, and ventilation going.
Like a symphony of technology, everything working together.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of working together, we haven't really talked about the people who make this symphony happen. The pilots, the maintenance folks, the engineers,
The folks behind the curtain.
the unsung heroes of aviation, for sure. They have to understand these systems so well, they're committed to safety, and they can think on their feet and solve problems under pressure.
What kind of training and know-how do you need to work with these systems?
Oh, it's intense. Pilots, for example, go through some serious training on all the aircraft systems, air conditioning, pressurization, the MEL, the whole shebang. They got to know not just how things work, but how to fix problems and make tough decisions while they're up in the air.
So it's more than just flying the plane, it's being a systems expert too.
You got it. And then you've got the maintenance technicians who are keeping those systems in tip-top shape, fixing what needs fixing. They got to know those technical manuals inside and out and be able to figure out what's wrong and have the skills to do those really precise repairs.
It's like its own specialized world.
It is. And of course, there are the engineers who are designing and building these systems in the first place. They're the ones pushing the limits of technology, always trying to make air travel safer, more efficient, and, well, comfier for all of us.
It's wild to think about all the collaboration and expertise behind every single part of aviation, from the initial design to the day-to-day upkeep. It's all a team effort.
Absolutely. And it's a team that's always learning and getting better, always aiming for those top-notch safety and performance standards.
I'm thinking back to what we talked about with the MEL, how it lets airlines fly safely even when things aren't perfect. But is there a limit to, how many things can be broken at once?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And those limits are spelled out in the MEL. It's not just a matter of checking boxes and saying, okay, we can fly without this, this, and this. Every part that's not working could affect other systems and the overall safety of the flight.
So it's not just one thing. It's the combination of things that matters.
Exactly. The MEL looks at all those possible interactions and makes sure that no combo of broken things would, put the flight at risk.
Like a complicated equation where everything has to balance out.
That's a good way to think about it. And the pilots and those maintenance technicians are trained to understand that equation and make smart choices based on what's going on.
Sounds like a lot of responsibility.
It is. But it's a responsibility that the aviation industry takes very seriously.
I think we've done a pretty deep dive here into aircraft air conditioning and pressurization. We've gone over the systems, the engineering, and the human expertise behind it all.
And hopefully our listeners have a new appreciation for how complex and amazing air travel really is.
For sure. It's easy to take it all for granted when you're just trying to get to your destination, but when you really look at the science and the engineering behind it all, it's pretty mind-blowing.
So next time you're on a flight, as you're getting settled in and you feel that cool air from the vent above you, take a second to think about all that technology humming away around you.
And maybe give a little mental high five to all those dedicated folks, the engineers, the pilots, the maintenance crews, working hard to keep us safe and comfy up in the air.
Safe travels, everyone.
Until next time, happy flying.